Joe Biden spent all day Monday deciding if this upcoming trip to Israel on Wednesday would be worth it. He has decided it is.
I mean, this is absolutely unprecedented.
Well, this will be an absolutely extraordinary visit coming just days after these unconscionable terrorist attacks and at the very moment that Israel is contemplating its next steps.
But what a trip. For one, he's literally going into an active war zone. And his task is this: stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel while finding a humanitarian path forward for Palestinians who are dying, starving, and without hope. Avoid turning this into a larger regional war against those who would want to destroy Israel and the United States, while trying to figure out how to save hundreds of U.S. citizens and hostages currently trapped in Gaza. So, how does he manage that balancing act?
Breaking right now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Israel's Prime Minister forced to take shelter at a bunker at a moment's notice.
Even in Tel Aviv, among the maybe safer places to be in this war, there is the constant overhead threat of Hamas and Hezbollah rocket attacks.
Even U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken imagined this. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli war cabinet had to shelter in a bunker for 5 minutes when air raid sirens went off here in Tel Aviv.
More recently, a group of U.S. senators visiting Tel Aviv also had to scramble for shelter.
A bipartisan group of U.S. senators was forced to take shelter in Tel Aviv today amid rocket fire.
We're having a lunch up in the hotel, and the sirens went off. We heard them, and we were all rushed into a shelter and had to stay there until the coast was clear. And then a few minutes ago, this press conference was delayed for the same reason.
Biden will understand this threat. When he visited the other war zone, Ukraine, in February, something similar happened. But here's something you may not know. That trip to Ukraine was a surprise visit, but Russia, the invading force, was in on the secret. As in, the U.S. gave Russia hours of advance warning. Careful where you shoot, the U.S. president is coming through. That was confirmed by Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, who told journalists the warning was for deconfliction purposes. But in Israel, where groups like Hamas and Hezbollah may see the U.S. as a mortal enemy, the calculation may be different. This is maybe the most delicate part of the juggling act: how to support Israel while urging restraint at the same time. We can see this push and pull in a recent speech where Biden said this:
"We must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel."
And then, less than 90 seconds later, this:
"We uphold the laws of war, the law of war. It matters. There's a difference."
The law of war is a nod to whether Israel's constant airstrikes, killing thousands of civilians, is a proportional reaction. Biden knows there is an ebb and flow to support for Israel.
While I recognize Israel's legitimate security concerns, I also remind Israel that military operations must be conducted in strict accordance with international humanitarian law. Civilians must be respected and protected at all times.
Watch how Biden navigates a question on 60 Minutes this week about whether Israel should stop the war.
Is it time for a ceasefire?
Look, there's a fundamental difference. Israel is going after a group of people who engage in barbarism that is as consequential as the Holocaust. And so I think Israel has to respond.
But then, in that same interview,
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake.
on the one hand, the U.S. continues to send a steady stream of war supplies, ammunition, to Israel, along with not one but two carrier strike groups. While, on the other hand, it says,
there needs to be a Palestinian Authority. There needs to be a path to a Palestinian state.
Now, to be clear, none of these are conflicting statements, but they are certainly competing pressures, and it all hints at perhaps the most immediate crisis of all.
There is no one to protect us, this little girl says. There's no one to come save us. How are we supposed to live? How? Answer me.
In Gaza, more than 2 million Palestinians have been under near constant threat of bombardment for more than a week now. More than 2,800 dead, countless more than that injured. Israel's blockade has choked off all incoming supplies. That means no food, clean drinking water, medicine, fuel. Biden has been very careful not to be critical of this move, but he said this.
You would like to see a humanitarian corridor that allows some of the 2 million Gazans out of the area.
Yes.
You would like to see humanitarian supplies brought into Gaza?
Yes.
And let's not forget, there are maybe 600, 700 U.S. citizens in Gaza right now desperately seeking a way out. So, whether by leaning on Egypt or on Israel, Biden will be looking for a way to help the very people its ally in Israel is bombing.
Egypt remains a really important component to any kind of peace arrangement, so I expect there to be a lot of diplomacy between the U.S., Egypt, and many others in the days ahead.
For all those considerations, the biggest elephant in the room is the potential for the war between Israel and Hamas to explode internationally, pulling in other violent groups the U.S. sees as terrorist threats. We did a whole piece about this. Hezbollah is based in Lebanon. That's north of Israel, just west of Syria. It is a longtime ally of Hamas, and between the two, arguably the greater threat.
Hezbollah is assessed at this point to have a military that is equal in strength to most European armies.
Basically, Hamas is not alone. It has allies who want nothing more than to see the complete destruction of Israel. If they were to combine forces, Israel's survival would be at risk, and the U.S. would be forced to step in. But Biden does not want more American casualties in the Middle East. The symbolism of his visit sends a clear message to Hezbollah, to Syria, to Iran, to anyone contemplating getting involved in the fight.
Don't. Don't
come across the border. Don't escalate this war.
That's right.
But if nothing else, Biden can likely count on at least one thing. His mere presence may delay Israel's ground invasion.
And there is a risk, obviously, that he inflames some of those tensions rather than solves them. But it's evident that everybody's trying to find a way to avoid the ground offensive happening, because that is where lies the route to escalation.
The Biden administration has been very supportive of Israel through this crisis, very likely to continue to be so. I don't think there's going to be any kind of game of got you from either side during the next few hours and days.
So if nothing else, Biden's balancing act buys the world time. What Israel decides to do with it is the next $1 million question.